So Customs and Border Protection are now reviewing their policies after another child died in their custody. Now, the 8-year-old boy identified as by Guatemalan authorities as Felipe Gomez Alonso had been in the Border Patrol's custody with his father since December of 2018. I'm sorry, December 18th. Now, what happened is they had entered the United States 3 miles west of a legal entry point. So, of course, here come conservatives, here come right-wingers saying, oh, no, he came in illegal. He came in illegal. What are you going to do? Well, apparently, if you're the Trump administration, you're just going to let that child die. But anyway, now, look, I don't necessarily want to blame it on Customs and Border Patrol, and I'm gonna break down why when I give you this information. I think you'll understand. Now, Customs and Border Patrol said an agent had first noticed that the boy had a cough and glassy eyes at about 9 a.m. on Monday. He was eventually hospitalized twice and died just before midnight, according to the agency. Now, I want to give you a timeline here from CNN. Now, according to that timeline, the child had originally been diagnosed with a common cold and given some Tylenol around noon on Christmas Eve. That's the 24th. Now, before leaving the hospital, he actually had a temperature of 103. So they ended up holding him a little bit longer and then later releasing him from emergency care with a prescription for ibuprofen and an antibiotic. So I'm not necessarily sure what he had or what he died of. But later that evening, he began feeling sick. He ended up vomiting. His father first had declined medical assistance as he said, hey, I thought he was starting to feel better. I think we'll be okay. Later on, an agent said, no, the kid is not okay. We're going to have to take him to the hospital. That was around 7 p.m. At 10 o'clock, he was hospitalized again. And on the way to the hospital, he ended up losing consciousness and after vomiting, and then once they got to the hospital, they were unable to revive him and he was pronounced dead. So that's what happened. So again, that's your timeline of what happened. And I don't necessarily know who exactly is to blame for that immediate situation. So the question, though, I think on a lot of people's minds is, well, how could we have prevented this? And I don't really know the answer to it. Now, I do know that from the day that they were detained, from the time he died, there might have been ways that they could pick up that he was ill. They ended up doing a lot of traveling from different places, being detained in different places, sometimes several hour trips. And that's reminiscent of somebody who had, the 7-year-old who had also previously died during transport when she had a fever of 105. So now I don't know if the travel had added on to that, or it definitely couldn't have helped. I don't think it was from that travel, but likely from the trip from Guatemala itself, which is, just think about it. It's got to be a horribly exhausting, draining, dangerous trip. So why they don't have medical technicians on hand at the border or these facilities, I don't know. And they absolutely should. I mean, according to news outlets, the Customs and Border Patrol, they're asking for help from different branches of the government to provide health care. But why don't they already have that on hand? I don't understand why that would be something that would be missing. So that's a serious problem, not having EMTs on staff. Now, another problem, another more long-term problem that immigration proponents, of course, have talked about is the Trump administration turning away people from legal ports of entry. Now, that is likely, I'm not entirely sure, but that is likely what happened in this situation. I mean, why do you think that they crossed the border 3 miles from a legal port of entry instead of going to the port of entry itself? Look, the Trump administration, it's been reported widely that they've been trying to stop asylum seekers from entering the country illegally in order to apply for asylum. Now, per the rules, in case some of you need a reminder, you have to either be present physically in the United States, i.e. crossing the border, right? Or be at a legal port of entry. Now, the Trump administration has been doing their best to block that and turn people away from those legal points of entry. So that's problematic. And if they did that with this family, then look, here's the thing. Maybe if they had been timely and let in, there is a chance that they could have caught whatever he had before this child died. Again, that's a big if, and we don't know that for certain. And I'm trying to be incredibly fair. I'm not going to call them, child murderers, because again, we don't know. We don't know, right? And look, maybe if they had been more efficient and let people in and not tried to push people away, maybe 7-year-old Jacqueline Cow might also still be alive. That was the girl who died of 105 fever on the way being transported between one facility and the other. So now, instead of looking into it, and this is to show you the Trump administration response, DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen said Jacqueline's death was, quote, a very sad example of the dangers of this journey. Well, no. See, she had already made the journey. She was already here. She was in the United States. Now, if she had died, before crossing the border, like on the actual journey from Guatemala, well, then that would be different. Then you could say, well, yeah, of course that journey's dangerous, right? But no, she was already here. She was already in the United States. She was already in Border Patrol custody, and she still died of 105 fever. That is our fault. But no. Nielsen said, quote, this family chose to cross illegally. Oh, it's not our fault. I mean, they were in our custody, and they died, but it's not our fault. It's their fault. They shouldn't have crossed the border. Oh, come on. Come on. No, what they chose to do is legally apply for asylum. Is their right under both U.S. and international law. And according to that law, if you impede anyone from doing so, from asserting their natural right, then you are in violation of that law, not them, which would make Border Patrol lawbreakers. Anybody who's engaging in turning people away from a port of entry is breaking the law. So it is a sick and callous statement from the Trump administration. Now, those are definitely the people we could blame. Nonetheless, thanks to some of the outrage from both of these unfortunate deaths, here you have Border Patrol that has promised a, quote, independent and thorough review of the circumstances. I wonder what they're going to find. Very likely they're going to find, oh, we didn't do anything wrong. Well, I'm not so sure about that one. Look, here's the thing. No review is going to do anything until we change the policy and stop blocking the ports of entry. We also need to get trained medical staff in every facility. Because, look, in this situation, there was no trained EMT. Why did I think of emergency medical hologram? I don't know. I'm kind of weird. It's a weird thing to think of. But EMT, right? If someone had been on staff, maybe they could have caught symptoms earlier. And maybe they could do other medical related things to make sure that the people in their care actually survive. Isn't that the whole point? But no, you look at the Trump administration, that's not their point. Their point is, let them die so that they won't come here. So we can send a goddamn message. Is that what you want to do? Is that what you support? If it is, then maybe you should be the one to go. Because we don't want people like you in our country that don't represent us. Now, here's the thing, right? Like, again, how sick do you have to be to want to celebrate the death of a child? Because that's what they did. Let's be honest. Because they're basically putting out the message, look how awful we are. We're going to let your kids die if they come here, so stay home. Well, I got news for you. People wouldn't be fleeing Honduras and Guatemala if their children were already in danger. I mean, how bad does it have to be for you to pack up your entire family and take this grueling trip through, you know, jungle, whatever, desert, just to get to America. How much do you have to be suffering at home to want to put your family through that? It's because, look, the situation in El Salvador and Honduras and those areas that are ravaged by corruption and the effects of the American drug war, by the way, makes it so much more possible that your child will be murdered by gang members or government officials or starved to death from, you know, like from extreme poverty and killed by corruption. So there's a much better chance of survival even through all that here in the United States, even though Border Patrol is letting some children die. So it's pretty easy to see why there are people out there that would make that choice. But nonetheless, that does not give us an excuse, or the Trump administration excuse, to be this cruel. So look, we need to change those policies, and yeah, we need a lot more than a review of what's going on the border, because look, these people, they are using their legal right to you know, claim asylum, and we should process those as fast as we can. Send the people back who don't qualify for asylum, but let the people in who do, because that is their right under the law. And hey, if you're a law and order person, then you should respect the law. But more importantly, if you're a moral person, or if you're a Christian, you know, you claim to be a good Christian person, well, then you got to do what the Bible tells you, man. Welcome the immigrant. And you got to do the right thing, and you got to do the moral thing, because these people do need our help. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills, and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent, progressive media.